My ex-boyfriend wants to get coffee and catch up. You're not invited, he informed me. Understood, I said. Got the ring deposit back while he was gone. When he came home, I was packed. How was coffee? Good, why are you we're done? Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The coffee was brewing, the Saturday sun was streaming through the bay windows of our downtown Chicago apartment, and everything felt exactly right. Perfect, even. Garrett was humming some generic pop song in the bathroom, and I was mentally running through my to-do list for the weekend. We were supposed to go look at a new couch, and then, later tonight, I was certain the moment I'd been waiting for was finally coming. We had been together for 5 years. 5 years of me, Audrey, building up his confidence, smoothing over his occasional professional missteps, and creating a comfortable home life that he, let's be honest, didn't contribute much to, financially or emotionally. But I excused it. I was in a great place. My recent promotion had pushed my salary into a bracket I hadn't dreamed of, and I was diligently contributing to a college fund for my non-existent kids and a strong retirement investment portfolio. I was the rock. And Garrett was, well, he was the charismatic face I wanted to wake up to every morning. This morning, though, something felt off. Garrett stepped out of the bathroom, and my internal alarm bell started ringing a high-pitched, insistent tune. He wasn't wearing his usual weekend uniform of faded athletic shorts and a worn-out t-shirt. He was wearing the crisp, light gray suit jacket he usually reserved for high-stakes business meetings, meticulously pressed, over dark jeans. He had even shaved that slight stubble he always let grow out, and his hair was slicked back, looking almost aggressively neat. Wow, I said, putting my mug down. You look sharp. Big meeting today? He smoothed the lapel of his jacket, avoiding my eyes as he walked past me to the kitchen counter. Oh, no. Not a meeting. Just catching up. I leaned against the counter, observing the subtle tension in his shoulders. Catching up with who? Dustin? Dustin was his oldest friend, and usually, their catch-up involved greasy burgers and too much beer, not a suit jacket. Garrett finally turned, a practiced, non-committal smile fixed on his face. No. Actually, I got a text from Justine. The name Justine hit me like a splash of cold water. Justine. His ex-girlfriend from college, the one he always casually mentioned was from money. The one who had dumped him unceremoniously when his venture capital startup failed 7 years ago. The one I'd always felt was a subtle ghost in our relationship. Justine? I kept my voice flat, factual. After all this time? That's random. He shrugged, pouring himself a mug of coffee with a little more flair than necessary. She's back in town for a few days, and she just wanted to grab a quick coffee, see how things have changed. Old times sake. He paused, taking a sip, and then looked right at me, a calculated hardness in his eyes. It's a business networking thing, really. She works at that huge firm now. Could be good contacts for me. I nodded slowly, my mind racing, pushing down the uncomfortable spike of jealousy. I immediately offered the olive branch, the one I always offered to smooth his fragile ego. That's great. I'd love to meet her. It's always good to put a face to the name. Maybe I can join for the last half hour, too. I'm always looking for new investment opportunities for my clients. Garrett's smile disappeared. The air in the kitchen went instantly frigid. I could hear the aggressive tick of the kitchen clock. It was the sound of something breaking. I watched him. I waited. I didn't realize it then, but in the 5 seconds of that silence, the entire foundation of my future was dissolving. I was holding a lifeline, offering a hand, and he was about to slice it off. I glanced over at the small, leather-bound folder tucked discreetly into a drawer I had left slightly ajar. Inside was the receipt for the large deposit I'd put down for the custom engagement ring. The jeweler had promised it would be ready by Friday. I knew Garrett had picked it up yesterday. I'd seen the subtle lump in his overnight bag. I pictured the moment tonight, the surprise, the tears, the future we were supposed to build, a future built on my hard work, my stability, and my unwavering belief in him. It was a beautiful picture, a comforting one, and I clung to it fiercely. He took a final, deep breath, the scent of expensive cologne filling the air. He was a different man today. A man who was about to deliver a verdict. Garrett set his coffee cup down with a sharp click that was unnecessarily loud. He folded his arms across his freshly pressed suit jacket, making sure I understood his complete inflexibility. The look he gave me wasn't one of a fiancé talking to his partner, it was a manager dismissing a subordinate. Audrey, no. I don't think you should come. My chest tightened, a familiar squeeze that had always been present whenever Garrett felt the need to flex his control. I tried to swallow the hurt, forcing a casual tone. Why not? I thought we were getting to the stage where we introduced each other to professional contacts. Especially ones with that kind of inheritance backing. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. It wasn't a laugh of amusement, it was the sound of a verbal lash. This isn't about professional contacts, honey. This is about history. And, frankly, Justine and I have a dynamic that would just be awkward with you there. I felt the sudden, hot wave of realization. This wasn't a business lunch. This wasn't even a casual coffee. It was exactly what he was doing, a power play, a deliberate move to push me into a box where I was just the quiet, supportive girlfriend, not an equal partner with a seven-figure salary who contributed the lion's share to our mutual accounts and was looking into securing marital assets with him. I stared him down, trying to find the man I was going to marry, but all I saw was a stranger, draped in cheap arrogance. So you're telling me, I clarified, still using that level, professional tone, that you are going to meet your wealthy ex-girlfriend, who publicly humiliated you years ago, and you are explicitly excluding me, your partner, your future wife, from this meeting. He sighed, shaking his head as if I were the one being difficult. This was classic Garrett. Always shift the narrative. You're being dramatic, Audrey. It's coffee. It's an hour. She wanted to catch up. That's it. And, to be perfectly clear, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, emphasizing every single word like a strike. You're not invited, he informed me. It was the twist of the knife. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the sheer, icy finality of the statement. The realization that he didn't respect me, he didn't value my presence, and he was perfectly willing to minimize me for a fleeting moment of validation from an ex who had the financial resources he craved. In that single, sharp moment, all the beautiful images I had constructed, the white dress, the shared college fund, the future home, even the simple weight of the ring on my finger, shattered into a million pieces. They weren't just shattered, they were vaporized. I saw the truth, stark and ugly. If I stayed silent, if I swallowed this insult, it wouldn't be the end. This was just the beginning of the slow, painful death of my self-respect. He would continue to push, to test my boundaries, to exclude me until I was just a financially convenient ghost in his life. He wanted a silent, compliant, successful wife who would fund his dreams without ever daring to question his decisions. My vision of our future together died a brutal death. It was replaced by a chilling clarity. The man I loved was gone, if he had ever existed at all. All that was left was a selfish, manipulative man who was using me to polish his bruised ego. I took a deep breath, and instead of reacting, instead of pleading or shouting, I did the only thing that felt right. I went cold. I retreated into myself, pulling up an emotional drawbridge so high and tight that no amount of his manipulation could reach me. Understood, I said. My voice was flat, factual, almost bored. I didn't offer a smile, I didn't offer a protest, and I didn't offer a single tear. I just gave him the most powerful thing I had left, my indifference. He looked momentarily confused, as if he expected fireworks, a fight, or at least a sniffle. He wanted the drama so he could play the victim. He got nothing. Good, he finally mumbled, sounding slightly disappointed. He grabbed his keys and wallet. I'll be back around 5. Don't wait up for me to start the couch shopping. I'll need a nap. He was giving me permission to be a good girl and wait. I simply watched him walk out, the sound of the door clicking shut feeling less like a goodbye and more like the start of a very complex, very lucrative business transaction for me. The moment the lock clicked on the front door, the silence of the apartment felt deafening. It was a thick, expectant silence, like the air right before a thunderstorm. I didn't waste a second. The cold feeling that had started in my chest was now a focused, intense heat, like a laser beam aimed at a single target, the future Garrett had just incinerated. I walked over to the drawer and pulled out the jeweler's receipt. It was from one of the most prestigious places in town, a place I had always dreamed of visiting for my engagement ring. I remembered the conversation with Garrett, months ago, where I had excitedly told him about the diamond shape I wanted. He'd barely listened, but he had agreed that I would handle the deposit, claiming his cash flow was tied up in a short-term investment. It was always something with Garrett's cash flow. I was the one who had spent a significant portion of my recent work bonus to secure the piece. I picked up my phone and dialed the number. I felt nothing. No heartbreak, no regret, just the single, driving focus of a woman protecting her assets. The jeweler, a pleasant, familiar voice named Mrs. Eleanor, answered quickly. Good morning, Eleanor, it's Audrey. Audrey, darling. I was just about to call Garrett. I'm so excited for you both. That cushion cut is absolutely breathtaking, ready for pickup this afternoon. I didn't flinch. I took a breath. My voice was perfectly flat, completely factual. Eleanor, thank you. Listen, I'm calling to cancel the order on the solitaire ring, order 884A. The engagement is off. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end, the kind of silence that usually follows a gasp. Oh, my dear. I am so terribly sorry. Is there anything I can do? No, but there is something you must do immediately, I continued, not allowing a single crack of emotion. The deposit of $12,000, which was paid directly from my personal checking account, needs to be fully refunded. The payment was made via wire transfer, and I need the money wired back to the exact same account by end of business today. Please send me the confirmation of the transfer via email. I spoke with the precision of a lawyer delivering a divorce settlement demand. I knew my legal rights on custom deposits, I had read the fine print. Since the ring hadn't been picked up by the commissioning party, Garrett, in this case, and since I was the one who made the initial payment and was canceling before the final handover, I was entitled to the full refund. Eleanor was professional enough to recover quickly. Understood, Audrey. I will process the full refund immediately. My deepest apologies. I'll email you the confirmation within the hour. Thank you, Eleanor. I hung up. Got the ring deposit back while he was gone. I walked to the kitchen counter and placed the deposit receipt next to the empty space where Garrett's coffee mug had been. It felt like a monument to a cancelled future, a tombstone for a dream that had died before it could be born. The money was back where it belonged. It was the first act of self-reclamation. It felt better than any diamond. It felt like freedom. I didn't stop to wallow. The money was one piece of the puzzle. The next piece was the physical removal of myself from his life, and the protection of my remaining assets. My anger had completely transformed into a cold, efficient logic. Garrett wasn't getting a breakdown, he was getting a spreadsheet. The clock was ticking. I had exactly 7 hours before Garrett was due back, which was more than enough time to execute phase 2. I didn't need a suitcase, I needed a strategy. Our apartment was full of things that told a story of a life we hadn't actually lived. There were the artifacts of a shared history, the tacky framed poster Garrett insisted on buying, the oversized sofa that was definitely his choice, the stacks of books he always pretended to read. I looked at these things and felt nothing but clinical detachment. They were just objects, heavy, dead weights of a relationship that had never been as solid as I pretended. My focus was on what was mine. I opened my closet, pulled out 3 large, sturdy storage bins I kept for seasonal clothes, and began packing. I didn't just grab clothes, I grabbed my professional life. My leather satchel, the carefully organized files for my biggest clients, my certificates and licenses, and the detailed financial records I had kept meticulously over the years. This last part was crucial. I had been secretly preparing for this moment, not knowing why but knowing I needed to be ready. For the last 6 months, ever since my promotional bonus came through and Garrett started asking for loans more frequently, I had been documenting every single dollar I contributed to our life. This included the down payment on the car, the $20,000 I'd put into the joint account for emergency savings, and the specific bank statements detailing my individual contribution to my investment portfolio. I had everything backed up to a secure cloud drive and a physical thumb drive hidden in a hollowed-out book. Next, I tackled the shared accounts. Garrett, typically, had been too lazy to ever fully understand the complexity of our banking structure, which I managed. The only shared account we had was a checking account used for groceries and rent. I opened my banking app, pulled up the balance, and moved my original $20,000 contribution, plus a small amount to cover the rent I had already paid for the month, directly into my private savings account. I left exactly $500 in the account. Enough for him to cover his next few bills, but not enough for him to accuse me of stripping him bare or starting complicated litigation over an empty checking account. I was careful to only claim funds that I could legally and clearly trace back to my own paychecks and accounts. No one could ever accuse me of theft. I was merely protecting my own assets from future devaluation by an entitled partner. The physical exertion of packing felt good, cleansing. I packed only what I needed, the clothes, the books that mattered, the expensive camera I'd bought with my own money, and my grandmother's small, antique jewelry box, my only true inheritance. Everything else, the shared kitchen gadgets, the ugly armchair, his gaming consoles, I left behind. I dragged the 4 bins and 2 suitcases to the back entrance. I had called a close female friend, Clara, and asked her to meet me in the parking lot in 3 hours with her truck, telling her only, I need an emergency extraction. No questions until we're driving. Clara was loyal, and her silence was guaranteed. The apartment looked strangely empty now, even with all of Garrett's clutter still in place. It felt like I was dismantling a stage set after the play had closed. I wasn't just moving out, I was detaching myself from a financial and emotional parasite. The meticulous details of the extraction process made me feel powerful, a stark contrast to the small, shrinking woman I had felt like an hour ago. Clara arrived exactly on time, pulling her beat-up Ford Ranger into the back lot. She took one look at my face, the blank, focused expression that promised impending change, and didn't say a word. She simply helped me load the bins and suitcases. We worked in total silence, the only sounds being the scrape of plastic against the pavement and the heavy thump as the bins settled in the truck bed. "Where to?" Clara finally asked, her voice low, as we secured the last strap. "Just to a hotel tonight. I'll give you the address in a minute. Then we'll apartment hunt next week." "Done," she replied, giving my arm a squeeze. It was a small act of solidarity that felt immense. Clara, thank goodness, understood the gravity of silent support. I climbed into my own car, the one I owned outright, thankfully, and started the engine, but I didn't drive off immediately. I looked out the window at Clara's truck, my entire material life packed up and ready to go. My financial independence had literally bought me this freedom. There was one last ritual to perform. I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my photo gallery, stopping at the most recent picture of Garrett, a candid shot where he was genuinely smiling, a rare glimpse of the charm that had originally fooled me. I stared at him, not with love, and not with hatred, but with profound pity for the man who was so hollow that he had to try to diminish the person who loved him most, just to feel momentarily tall. I didn't need to cry. The tears were done years ago, one small drop at a time, sacrificed to his demanding ego. I went to my settings. I pulled up Garrett's contact information and pressed block contact. A standard system prompt flashed on the screen. Are you sure you want to block this contact? My finger tapped the confirmation. I was sure. I tapped block contact. I did the same on every social media platform, Instagram, Facebook, even the professional networking site he used to humble brag. It wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of establishing boundaries and protecting my self-respect. I was removing his ability to weaponize my emotions and future. His tantrums, his apologies, his manipulations, they would all now hit a brick wall of silence. I was cutting the puppet strings, one channel at a time. I put the car in drive, signaled, and pulled out onto the quiet street behind Clara. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the apartment. The future was forward. The rear-view mirror was just glass. I had nothing left to look for in it. I was leaving behind the ghost of a relationship and the pathetic excuse for a fiancé. The feeling that washed over me was not sadness, but a fierce, powerful lightness. The lightness of a burden dropped. I was free. I had taken back my life, my assets, and my sanity, all while he was sipping coffee and chasing the fleeting validation of his wealthy ex-girlfriend. The battle wasn't over, but I had won the first, most important war, the war for my own soul. The sun had just dipped below the skyline, painting the apartment in harsh, judgmental shadows, when I heard the key turn in the lock. It was precisely 5:07 p.m. I hadn't gone far. I was parked just around the corner on a side street, nestled between a delivery van and a massive oak tree, where I had a clear view of our front door. My heart wasn't pounding with fear, it was pulsing with a steady, cold rhythm, the rhythm of preparation. Clara had already driven off 20 minutes earlier to the hotel with my bins and suitcases, leaving me alone for the final, necessary act, the confrontation and the exit. Garrett stumbled in, and I immediately registered the distinct difference between a man who was having coffee and a man who had downed several expensive bourbons, probably attempting to impress Justine with his supposed success and easygoing lifestyle. There was a slight unsteady sway in his step one, and his cologne, which was fresh this morning, was now battling the smell of cheap arrogance and alcohol. He didn't look like a successful man who had been networking, he looked like a pretentious boy who had been trying too hard and failing. He was holding a small, crumpled takeout bag, probably some pathetic attempt at an apology gift. He dropped his keys loudly on the console, the sound echoing in the now slightly hollow apartment. He was already talking before he saw me. "Honey, I'm back. Look, I'm sorry I was late." Justine just wouldn't let up. She had so many questions about the new investment strategies. You know how it is, the wealthy always want more access. He stopped short as he finally noticed the large, empty space in the hallway where my storage bins had been sitting earlier. Then, he saw the bare shelves in the coat closet and the distinct absence of my running shoes by the door. His eyes, momentarily unfocused from the alcohol, sharpened with confusion and then fear. They landed on the small, square envelope I'd left prominently on the kitchen counter, the printed refund confirmation from the jeweler. He didn't know what it was yet, but he knew it looked important, and it looked like it belonged to me. "What's all this?" he slurred slightly, gesturing vaguely towards the missing items too. "Where are your weekend bags? Did you go to your mother's? I thought we were going couch shopping." I turned from the window where I'd been waiting, standing straight and calm. My position in the dim light gave me an advantage. I didn't raise my voice, I simply spoke the words I'd rehearsed in my head, the words that would cut through his intoxication and his ego. I wanted him to answer the question, to own the arrogance of his morning. "Before we get into that," I began, my voice perfectly level. "How was coffee? Did you two catch up nicely?" Garrett blinked, momentarily thrown off by my calmness. He smiled, a thin, triumphant, self-satisfied smirk. He was still riding the wave of his perceived success with Justine. "Good, why are you?" I cut him off, delivering the final, surgical line. I didn't shout it, I said it like a verdict handed down by a bored judge. "We're done." 3. The change in him was instantaneous and staggering. The liquor-induced swagger vanished, replaced by an expression of shock and utter confusion. He actually looked around the room, as if trying to locate the hidden cameras or the punchline. His face was a masterpiece of disbelief. "What? What are you talking about, Audrey?" he stammered, his voice rising in panic. He took a staggering step back. "You're breaking up with me because I had coffee with an ex? That's insane for..." He was already moving into the denial and deflection stage, trying to make my perfectly logical response seem hysterical. He wanted to claim victimhood before he even understood the gravity of the situation. "No," I replied, taking a step closer to the door, maintaining my escape route. I wanted him to understand the why, but only for my own peace of mind, not his. "You were dismissive. There's a difference." 5. He laughed, a harsh, brittle sound of pure disbelief. "Dismissive? It was coffee, Audrey. I needed to network. She works at a big firm. You're overreacting. You always do this, you make a drama out of everything. You think every interaction I have is some kind of grand conspiracy against you, but it's just my life." He started moving toward me, trying to grab my arm, but I subtly shifted my weight and kept my distance, denying him any physical control. "I'm not overreacting, Garrett," I said, looking right into his panicked, unfocused eyes. "I simply accepted the message you were sending me today. You explicitly told me I wasn't invited into a part of your life. I realized that if I couldn't be invited to a simple coffee, I certainly wouldn't be invited into the life you really want, the one built on your ego and whatever inheritance Justine has access to. I stopped waiting for the life you promised me and decided to take the life I was building for myself." He saw the envelope then and snatched it up, the movement clumsy and erratic. He tore it open, his eyes briefly registering the header, "Jeweler Refund Confirmation." $12,000. The deposit I had paid for the custom engagement ring, returned. His face went instantly ashen. He looked from the receipt to the empty side of the closet, then back to the receipt, realizing that not only was I leaving, but I had cancelled the very symbol of his supposed commitment. The physical evidence of my preparation was undeniable. The panic in his voice turned to a furious, wounded roar. "You did this while I was gone? You cancelled the ring? You think you can just empty out the place and leave? You think you can treat me like this? I was going to propose tonight." He desperately wanted a fight. He wanted me to scream and cry so he could comfort me and then manipulate me into staying. But I was denying him the narrative he wanted. I had no tears. I had only my peace and the truth. I didn't empty the place, Garrett. I took what was mine. And yes, I can treat you like this. Because you taught me how little I was valued. That lesson is expensive for you, but it's free for me. You taught me that my stability and my salary were only valuable when they were funding your illusions. The control was completely slipping away from Garrett, and when the control slips, the narcissist lashes out. He moved from pleading to outright verbal assault, his face contorted with drunken rage and wounded vanity. "Expensive? What are you talking about? You're pathetic," he shrieked, waving his arms dramatically, taking off his expensive suit jacket and throwing it onto the floor. "You're going to throw away 5 years because I had a cup of coffee? You'll never find anyone who puts up with you like I did. You're too cold, Audrey. Too calculating. You're breaking up with me over an ex-girlfriend. You'll never find anyone who puts up with you like I did." The words were meant to sting, to hit my deepest insecurities, but they bounced right off my fortified resolve. His insults weren't true, they were just the desperate noise of a man losing his source of comfort and funding. He was the one putting up with me? I had funded his lifestyle for 2 years, paid for the bulk of our rent, and helped him secure his first real salary raise at work by rewriting his entire resume. "You didn't put up with me, Garrett," I corrected calmly, adjusting the strap of my small handbag, all I had left in the room. "You used me. You benefited from my stability and my promotional bonus. And you thought you could test my worth by running back to the woman who used to ignore you. You thought I would be a good little girl and wait for you to come home and propose, despite the public insult this morning. I looked at him, feeling the true, quiet strength of my exit. I don't need to put up with anyone. I need an equal partner. And you, clearly, are not capable of being one. You only value what other people validate. I moved toward the front door, my hand on the cold metal handle. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, he shouted after me, taking a frantic step forward. I was going to propose tonight. I swear. I was going to use the ring and everything. Don't walk out on me. What about our life? I paused in the doorway, giving him the last piece of truth, the final boundary. My voice was firm and carried the full weight of my resolved divorce from him. The future you're talking about ended the moment you told me I wasn't invited into my own. Goodbye, Garrett. I stepped out and gently, deliberately, closed the door behind me. I heard his roar of frustration on the other side, followed by the sound of something smashing against the wall, probably the coffee mug. I didn't flinch. I walked quickly down the steps, past the building manager's apartment, and out to my car. I pulled out, seeing Garrett's suit jacket figure standing rigidly on the sidewalk, his hands clenched into fists, staring blankly after me. He looked utterly defeated and utterly alone. I didn't slow down. The rush of adrenaline, which had kept me stable through the confrontation, began to fade, replaced by a deep, satisfying peace. I had asserted my worth and walked away entirely intact. I was no longer the girl hoping for a proposal, I was the woman who had already sealed her financial independence. If you're still listening and cheering me on, please help me out by liking this video and leaving the number 1 in the comments below, so I know that you're amazing, and I understand that you're with me throughout this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement, and it truly cheers me on. Please comment the number 1 so I can recognize you, and now, listen to me tell the rest of my story. I drove straight to the hotel, the anonymous address Clara had secured. It was a boutique place downtown, totally clean and impersonal, far away from any neighborhood Garrett would frequent. It was exactly what I needed. I spent the first 2 days focused intensely on finding a new apartment. I treated it like a job, scouring listings, making appointments, and focusing on areas that were both safe and accessible to my new, more successful life. I was particularly looking for a place with excellent security and a clear lease agreement that protected me from any future claims. This project, this absolute focus on logistics, kept the raw, residual emotions at bay. But Garrett, predictably, did not go quietly into that good night. He began his 3 distinct rounds of manipulation, exactly like a poorly written narcissistic playbook. Round 1, the gaslighting and denial, the day after my exit. He managed to get a text through before I had completely blocked him on the text now burner number I had set up months ago. Yes, I was that prepared. The text was short and venomous. You're still overreacting, Audrey. This is insane. You know I love you. You're destroying us over a misunderstanding. This is all your fault for being so paranoid. He was trying to rewrite history, making my calm, rational, financial action look like an emotional meltdown. He wanted me to doubt my sanity. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the message to my own private email account with a timestamp as documentation. Round 2, the tearful plea and victimhood, day 3. Since the texts failed, he moved to my voicemail. I had intentionally left my main number active, not because I wanted to hear from him, but because I knew his next move would be to try to use external validation to get to me, and I wanted to gather a complete record of his behavior. The message was slurred and pathetic. Audrey, please. I'm so sorry. I've been drinking. I need you. I can't function in this apartment alone. The silence is deafening. I'm so alone. Don't do this to me. Come home. You're my stability. My life is ruined without your salary contribution. In a flash of true, drunken self-absorption, he actually confessed that the reason for his panic was his ego and the sudden hole in his monthly budget, confirming the real motive behind his Fury 8. I immediately saved the voicemail to my secure cloud drive, labeling it evidence of intentional manipulation. I felt no pity. I only felt the intellectual satisfaction of a prediction fulfilled. The silence of the apartment he'd now inherited was his punishment, not my problem 9. Round 3, the absolute rage and prediction of failure, day 5. By this point, he realized the appeals were pointless. His final voicemail was pure, unadulterated fury, the last scream of a man whose power source had been disconnected. Fine. Go. You're going to regret this, Audrey. You think you're so smart, but you're just a calculating B*H. You'll come crawling back when you realize how hard it is out there without my contacts and my support. You're going to fail, Audrey. You'll come crawling back. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what a psycho you are. I listened to his entire script play out with quiet satisfaction. He had followed the playbook perfectly. I felt no pain, only the intellectual fulfillment of a theory confirmed. The cycle was complete. I found a wonderful, light-filled condo about 40 minutes away from the neighborhood we had shared. It was slightly smaller than the old place, but entirely mine. I secured the lease immediately and started the process of settling in. I felt good, clean, and financially sound. I even started looking for a specialist lawyer who dealt with complicated financial separations, just in case Garrett escalated his threats. I was always prepared. That feeling lasted exactly 1 week until the email arrived, proving I was right to prepare. It was from Garrett, written in all capital letters, a desperate, childish attempt to sound imposing. He had finally noticed that the joint checking account, the one I had diligently used for years to cover our joint expenses, was essentially empty. He also noticed the automatic email notification from the bank regarding the large transfer of funds I had made. Subject: You stole all the money. I am contacting a lawyer. The email was a blazing tirade. He accused me of theft, of criminal misconduct, and threatened swift litigation and the immediate hiring of a divorce lawyer to ensure I was prosecuted for stealing his assets. He clearly assumed that because the money had been in a joint account, it was automatically shared money, regardless of the source. He focused solely on the total balance, not the origin of the funds. This was a new escalation, the financial twist, and a calculated betrayal he didn't realize I was entirely prepared for. I sat down calmly at my new kitchen table, opened my digital files, and crafted a response that was entirely without emotion, drafted with the help of a paralegal friend, just to make sure the terminology was precise and irrefutable. I was not going to give him an inch of emotional or legal ground. I attached 4 distinct documents. A statement from my bank showing the initial, large wire transfer of my $20,000 promotional bonus into the joint account 4 months prior, the original, notarized personal agreement we had signed when we first bought the apartment. I had insisted on this years ago. The agreement explicitly stated that any individual investment used for shared assets would be considered a personal loan to the partnership, to be repaid upon separation or sale. A simple calculation showing that the $20,500 I had transferred back was exactly my original investment plus $500 to cover the remaining utilities I had paid, leaving the account balance to zero. A copy of the email from the jeweler confirming the full refund of the engagement ring deposit was transferred back to my account, proving I had not used his money to buy my own freedom. My reply was 1 sentence long: please find attached the documented proof of source funds, which were returned to my individual account pursuant to the signed contract and traceable deposits. Further threats of legal action, or attempts to damage my professional reputation, will be forwarded directly to my counsel. I hit send. Garrett had tried to weaponize the law and his perceived victimhood, and I countered with hard evidence and meticulous preparation. He wanted a fight over money. I gave him the cold, unassailable scale of justice, completely backing him into a corner. 13. He went completely silent after this. The sudden end of the financial confrontation confirmed my victory. I didn't just walk away, I walked away financially protected, leaving him with an empty shared account and the crushing realization that he couldn't bully or lie his way out of this reality. Garrett, however, still needed an audience for his martyrdom. Since he couldn't reach me, and his lawyer threats had failed, he used the next available tool, his friends, his flying monkeys. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unrecognized number, originating from a different state code. I almost let it go, but the cold logic in me suggested I needed to hear the next piece of his script. It was Dustin 14, Garrett's perpetually unemployed friend, who always seemed to live vicariously through Garrett's meager successes and endless ambition. Dustin's family had always had a decent inheritance, and he felt he was entitled to comment on the life choices of others. "Audrey, thank God you picked up," Dustin said, his voice dripping with false concern and the kind of forced sincerity that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Look, man, Garrett is a mess. I know he screwed up. He told me everything, and yeah, he's an idiot. But you know how he is, he's just a little insecure. He just needs a little validation. But you are just being so cold, so calculated." He then delivered the lines Garrett had undoubtedly fed him, trying to appeal to some sense of feminine duty I clearly did not possess. "You're taking it too far. He had a few drinks. He didn't sleep with her. He said she just wanted to catch up. Come on, a real woman would find it in her heart to forgive him after 5 years 15. You're supposed to be his support system, not his executioner." I almost laughed out loud. I truly did. Dustin was doing his job as the flying monkey, trying to manipulate me back into the relationship using a facade of moral superiority. "Dustin," I said, cutting him off, my tone entirely devoid of heat. "I am not responsible for Garrett's emotional state, nor is the severity of my decision determined by the depth of your relationship with him. He was dismissed from my life not because of one coffee, but because he fundamentally and repeatedly disrespected my position and my self-respect." I continued, asserting my boundary. "The information that you are relaying to me, whether true or false, is no longer my concern. My decision to end the engagement and separate our finances was final, rational, and documented. Do not contact me again on behalf of him or for any other reason." I hung up and blocked the number. The very next day, I saw the predictable social media fallout. Garrett, unable to contact me and now enraged by Dustin's failure to retrieve me, used his public profile to air his grievances. He posted cryptic, melancholy statuses about greedy women and distorted stories, and even a mournful black and white picture of himself with the caption, "Learning who my real friends are." It was a pathetic attempt to rewrite the story to his followers, painting me as the heartless, materialistic woman who had abandoned him right when he was about to make a huge professional leap. He tried to portray the loss of the ring deposit and the joint savings as evidence of my greed. But the attempts were fruitless. I saw a few comments from mutual friends asking vague questions, but without my participation, the story couldn't gain traction. It was simply the desperate noise of a man trying to claw back control and public sympathy. I had asserted my worth, and his online tantrum was utterly powerless against the wall of silence and competence I had built around myself. I had already won the war of information and the war of finance. The social war was just his final, pathetic performance. The quiet of my new life was precisely what I had wanted. I had spent 2 weeks meticulously ignoring Garrett's pathetic social media updates and the occasional mysterious phone calls from numbers that were clearly burner lines or people I hadn't talked to in years. The silence was my victory, a white flag he was desperately trying to tear down. I was now operating on the principle that if Garrett had no audience, he had no power. The days were filled with the peaceful, productive hum of a woman building her own empire, undisturbed by the constant, needy vibrations of his ego. Then, at 9:15 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday morning, the final email arrived. It wasn't full of rage or legal threats, it was quiet, reflective, and utterly defeated. The desperation was gone, replaced by a hollow exhaustion that even I, his victim, could recognize as genuine. It felt like the final, shaky signature on our divorce papers, even though we had never officially married. The subject line was simply, "I went to the jeweler." I opened it, not out of curiosity, but because I knew this was the end of his script. This was the moment of admission. I felt a surge of cold, focused attention, similar to the feeling I got when closing a major investment deal. This was the final, non-legal documentation in the separation process. The email itself was long, poorly punctuated, and sounded like a broken, miserable man. He wasn't addressing me, he was confessing to a wall, trying to make sense of a reality he couldn't control. Audrey. I don't know what you want me to say. I guess I went down to that jeweler's shop today. You know, the place on Michigan Avenue, the one with the velvet rope. I wanted to see if they would still let me buy the ring. I thought maybe I could prove to you, or at least to myself, that the whole thing was still real. That our engagement was still just a misunderstanding, a big dramatic spat that would end with me on one knee. They said no. They said you had cancelled it the minute I left that morning. I think the woman, Eleanor, she even sounded sorry for you, not for me. She was so professional, but I could tell she knew what I was, a cheap idiot who lost a diamond over a cup of coffee. She told me the deposit was already refunded to the account it came from. My card, by the way, was declined when I tried to buy something small, just to save face. I realized then, standing there, smelling like cheap liquor from the night before, that this wasn't about the money or the argument. You weren't mad. You weren't hurt. You were done. You made your decision while I was still at the coffee shop. That hit me. That was the first thing that actually hit me. Not the yelling, not the empty bank account, but the fact that you decided I wasn't worth the drive home. You cancelled me before I even finished my cappuccino. He then plunged into the anticlimax of his coffee date with Justine, the pathetic root of his downfall. The confession was brutal in its honesty. I went back over that morning 100 times. I was so arrogant, Audrey. I felt so small after my last failed pitch that I needed to feel big. I thought I could go, flirt with Justine, maybe get a promise of a job lead, feel important because she has that huge inheritance and the fancy job, and then come home to you, the perfect, stable, successful woman, who would still be waiting for her proposal. I wanted the drama, Audrey. I needed you to fight for me, to show me I was worth fighting for. And Justine, she wasn't even interested in me. She was barely listening to my new career plans. She was just there to check a box. She used the catch-up to try to sleep with me one last time, mostly just to see if she still could, a power move, nothing more. And when I said no, she vanished. She just packed up her expensive bag and said, "Good luck with that, Garrett." No job offer, no flattery. Just a cold reminder of where I stood. Just like she did 7 years ago. I was just a sad footnote in her life, a trophy she didn't even want to polish. I lost everything, Audrey. My future, my stability, my partner, all because I wanted a 1-hour ego boost from some woman who dropped me the minute she realized I wasn't rich. I was trying to look big for her, and in the process, I lost the one person who ever actually saw me, the one who covered my rent and pushed my salary higher. I understand now. You did the right thing. I'm sorry. I really am. I hope you find what you deserve. It was the closest thing to genuine, unadulterated closure I could have ever asked for. It was a clear, typed admission that I had won the strategic battle and that his betrayal was born of insecurity and vanity, not true feeling for Justine. He was sorry, but only for the consequences he faced. He had finally admitted that my value was not in my love, but in my resources, and that he had recklessly discarded those resources for a cheap thrill. I felt a profound sense of closure, but not relief. Relief implies tension. I had been calm since the moment I walked out the door. This was simply confirmation of my intellectual assessment of his character. I read the email once, confirming the contents, confirming his utter, complete defeat. I didn't save it as evidence. I didn't linger on the words. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his closure. My strength came from my own resolve, not from his late-stage regrets. The moment I hung up with the jeweler, I had already granted myself the closure I needed. His email was just a piece of unnecessary documentation, a final piece of clutter, and I deleted it. I felt the last lingering thread connecting us snap. I was free. The 2 months that followed my final disconnection from Garrett were a period of rapid, beautiful reconstruction. It wasn't just about moving apartments, it was about moving my entire existence from a state of anxious accommodation to one of profound self-respect and peace. It was the hardest, but most rewarding, project I had ever undertaken. The new Kanho apartment was everything the old one wasn't. It was located in a vibrant neighborhood closer to the lake, slightly smaller than the shared space, but the light was better, the view of the city skyline was spectacular, and most importantly, it was mine. I didn't have to consult anyone about paint colors or furniture. Garrett always demanded neutral, beige tones. He said anything else was too distracting for his creative process or that bright colors made people anxious. Now, I was free to create a space that reflected my true, slightly dramatic self. I bought a vibrant yellow velvet armchair that Garrett would have immediately called too loud and started painting one accent wall a deep, dramatic sapphire blue, the color of pure decisiveness. The process of painting, sanding, and assembling flat-pack furniture was immensely therapeutic. Each hammer blow, each calculated measurement, was an act of rebuilding not just a home, but my entire sense of self-worth. It was perfect, no memories here, no ghosts. It was a sanctuary of my own making, an architectural testament to my financial independence. I remember one afternoon, sitting amidst the boxes, feeling an intense rush of personal sovereignty. This was more valuable than any inheritance or marital assets could ever be. I began to explore hobbies I had suppressed. I rediscovered my love for pottery, a hobby Garrett had dismissed as messy and pointless years ago, claiming the clay dust ruined the aesthetic. Now, my dining table was covered in clay and glaze. I spent hours shaping the wet earth, finding a profound metaphor in turning something formless into something beautiful and strong. I was living a life that was louder, messier, and infinitely more honest than the carefully curated, quiet lie I had maintained with him. I even started taking a night class focused on advanced ceramic glazing techniques, something that fulfilled a creative itch I hadn't realized I possessed. Crucially, I started to reconnect with friends I had unintentionally neglected. Friends like Clara, and especially my longtime colleague, Sarah, whom I had kept at arm's length because Garrett was insanely jealous of her successful career and high salary. He always whispered subtle remarks that Sarah was too aggressive or too focused on money, remarks that were clearly projections of his own insecurities. Now, those friendships flourished. They were thrilled by my decisive, clean break. They didn't see me as broken, they saw me as a hero who had conducted a surgical divorce from a life that didn't serve her. "I can't believe you cancelled the ring deposit while he was sitting there drinking coffee with his ex," Sarah told me over a bottle of wine one evening, shaking her head in awe. "That's not just moving on, Audrey. That's a masterclass in protecting your assets and demonstrating profound emotional intelligence. Most women would wait for the fight. You went straight for the closing documents. You saved yourself a massive legal headache down the line." I started pursuing the advanced certification I had always wanted in my financial sector, a step Garrett had repeatedly discouraged, saying it would make my work hours too long for our future family life, meaning, too busy to cater to his demands. The professional achievement was exhilarating. My investment portfolio was growing, my salary was about to see another substantial bump, and the sense of control over my own destiny was intoxicating. I was even mentoring a younger woman at the firm, helping her manage her own college fund and professional path, finding immense satisfaction in guiding someone toward financial independence. I realized that for years, I had molded myself into the quiet, supportive partner Garrett needed, shrinking my ambitions and my personality to fit his fragile ego. Now, I was living for myself. My new life was safe, stable, and incredibly fulfilling, a million times better than anything I had left behind. I had gone from living a life for two people to living a life solely for myself. The final, public confrontation happened when I was least expecting it, and yet, I was entirely ready. It was the ultimate test of my unshakable contentment. It was a Friday night, precisely 3 months and 5 days after I had driven away from the apartment. I was at a popular, slightly upscale wine bar in my new neighborhood with Clara and Sarah, celebrating that major promotion I had secured at my firm. I felt great, confident, well-dressed in a sharp red dress, and utterly peaceful. I had just finished telling them about my decision to finally establish a proper trust fund for my future, an act of financial planning Garrett had always scoffed at. We were laughing about some ridiculous office anecdote when the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. I looked up and saw them, Garrett and Dustin. They were standing near the bar entrance, looking utterly out of place. This wasn't their usual dive bar. This place required a certain degree of refinement, and they clearly didn't possess it anymore. Garrett, in particular, was a shadow of the man I had left. The crisp, light gray suit jacket was gone, replaced by a shirt that looked too tight, unpressed, and possibly stained. His demeanor was nervous, not arrogant. He looked thin, his posture slouched, and his eyes held a desperate, hungry hope that instantly reminded me of the man who had pleaded into my voicemail, the man whose entire self-worth depended on external validation and the money I provided. He saw me instantly, and the air went out of him like a punctured tire. I didn't flinch. I turned back to my friends, taking a sip of wine and continuing the conversation about investment strategies, demonstrating the unshakable contentment that was now my shield. I allowed no visible reaction, no anger, no recognition, no sign that he held any power over my emotional state. He was a piece of scenery. Garrett, however, couldn't ignore me. After a minute of intense staring, he mumbled something to Dustin, who looked horrified, and then walked directly over to our table, approaching me as if I were a queen he had once offended. "Audrey," he said, his voice hesitant and low, completely lacking the booming arrogance I remembered. He sounded small. I raised an eyebrow slightly, a small, controlled gesture that conveyed polite acknowledgement of an unwelcome acquaintance. "Garrett." He fidgeted with the edge of the table, his hands shaking slightly. He looked down at his shoes, unable to hold my gaze. I haven't been great," he admitted, finally meeting my eyes, searching for a sign of recognition or sympathy, a crack in the fortress of my self-respect. "My job is, well, you know. It's been tough without your help with the pitches. I miss you. What I did was the stupidest thing I've ever done. I should have proposed that night. I should have." He trailed off, clearly expecting me to jump in, to offer a word of comfort or an opening for reconciliation. He was throwing himself on my mercy, hoping that my natural kindness would trump my sense of justice. He wanted to be saved, and he expected the woman he discarded to be his savior. I watched him, and the strange truth was, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no desire for retribution, and certainly no love. He was an artifact from a history book I no longer read. He was a small, irrelevant problem I had solved months ago. The power imbalance that had plagued our entire relationship had violently flipped. I took a slow sip of my wine and finally answered him, my voice carrying the confidence of a woman who had successfully navigated a divorce from a narcissist without ever needing a lawyer, a woman who had secured her entire inheritance without his interference. "Garrett," I said, my tone polite but distant, like addressing a waiter. "I remember what you did. But you're right. That was a different life." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over him, acknowledging his presence for the final time. "And you're not in it." My words hit him like a physical blow. They weren't an attack, they were simply a statement of objective reality. I hadn't attacked his character, I had only stated that he was functionally obsolete in my world. He didn't argue. He didn't try to gaslight. He didn't even try to insult me. He simply deflated, the last vestiges of his bravado crumbling. He finally understood that my indifference was a far more powerful weapon than any shouting match. The woman he knew, the one who would fight, cry, and ultimately stay, was gone. He was left with a stranger who saw him only as a ghost. Garrett stood there for what felt like an eternity, a heavy, silent presence struggling to compute the devastating simplicity of my rejection. His eyes darted around, searching for a sympathetic face, finding none. He was a monument to his own failure, a man whose entire identity was predicated on his partner's need for him, a need that had completely vanished. The man who had once swaggered in our kitchen, believing he was too important for my presence, now realized he was too insignificant for my sustained attention. He finally shook his head once, a slow, miserable movement, and then, without another word, he simply turned and walked away. He didn't look back at our table. He walked stiffly, his shoulders hunched, and picked up a bewildered Dustin at the bar. He muttered something quickly to his friend, and the two of them left the restaurant, the very picture of quiet, humiliating defeat. There was no grand exit, no final dramatic slam of a door, just a silent, pathetic retreat into the night. Clara and Sarah looked at me, stunned. Clara was the first to speak, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Wow," she breathed. "That was intense. I've never seen anyone shut a person down so completely without raising their voice. You didn't even blink." "He looked like he aged 5 years," Sarah added, taking a thoughtful sip of her wine. "I bet he expected you to scream, or maybe even forgive him. He expected you to be the pathetic one." "Who is that guy, anyway?" Clara asked again, her voice low and curious. "He looked like he was about to cry, Audrey. Did he owe you money?" I smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached my eyes. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the final, perfect confirmation of my new status. I looked at my friends, raised my glass, and gave them the only answer that mattered, the one that sealed his fate in my mind forever. "No one," I confirmed. "He's just an old acquaintance from a chapter of my life that's been permanently closed. His drama is no longer my plot." The conversation shifted easily back to our celebration, but the air felt different. They didn't just see me as their friend, they saw me as a warrior who had successfully navigated the messy, painful territory of emotional and financial warfare and emerged victorious. I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection, gazing at the cityscape lights through the wine bar window. My life was now defined by forward momentum. The aftermath continued to unfold, but without affecting me. Dustin completely unfollowed me on all social media, the last pathetic tether to Garrett's world officially cut. I heard through a distant colleague that Garrett had started taking on multiple, tedious side jobs, desperate to cover the rent and bills that my salary had once quietly subsidized. He was struggling to manage basic adult responsibilities, forced to face the harsh reality of his own limited competence, something I had protected him from for years. His failure wasn't my revenge, it was the natural and inevitable consequence of his choices. I, on the other hand, was flourishing. My new apartment was fully settled, adorned with my ugly but beloved pottery. My investment portfolio was performing strongly, and I had started using my higher salary to invest in further education, not in an entitled fiancé. I was free to focus on my career trajectory, my own dreams, and my well-being. My life now, with my financial security, my new apartment, and my loyal friends, was better than anything I had left behind. I was no longer the invisible woman, the one whose stability was taken for granted. I was Audrey, the woman who took back her own story. The fight wasn't worth the pain, but the freedom was worth every single calculated step I took that day. I left a narcissist on the sidewalk with nothing but the truth and a cancelled ring receipt. I hope that my story helps some of you out there who might be feeling small or dismissed in your own relationships. Remember, your self-respect is your most valuable asset. Protect it, defend it, and never, ever let someone else tell you that you are not invited into your own future. You deserve a life that is completely, unapologetically yours. If my story resonated with you, and if you found yourself cheering me on, please help me out one last time. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs a little push toward their own freedom, and let me know in the comments your favorite part of Garrett's spectacular, well-deserved downfall. Thank you so much for listening. I love you all. As the story closes, it leaves us with a profound reminder of the strength that lies in knowing your worth and standing firm in your values. Audrey's journey is not just about walking away from a toxic relationship, it's about reclaiming her identity, prioritizing her self-respect, and understanding that true love and partnership cannot thrive in the shadow of manipulation or inequality. Her courage to choose herself over someone who diminished her value is a testament to the power of self-awareness and resilience. This story teaches us that sometimes, the bravest decision is the one that leads to freedom, even if it means letting go of the familiar. It reminds us that we are not defined by someone else's validation, but by the choices we make to protect our peace and pursue a life that aligns with our true potential. Audrey's quiet strength and unwavering resolve inspire us to embrace change, even when it feels daunting, and to trust that the future holds brighter possibilities when we let go of what no longer serves us. Now, it's your turn. What does this story mean to you? Have you ever had to make a tough decision to prioritize your own happiness? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this reflection resonated with you. Your voice matters, and together, we can inspire each other to live boldly and authentically.